They used one opioid, especially oxycodone, which now is known as oxycodone, to increase his mental capacities, actually. While you're high on that drug, you're quite sharp and you're quite charismatic. You feel really good, and that well-being kind of transmits to other people who don't know why you're like in such a good mood. Like, I read a lot of reports from very high-ranking generals, obviously officers, that they were so surprised that Hitler was so confident.
I'm joined today by Norman Ohler, one of Germany's best-known writers who went from being a novelist to an international best-selling writer of history books, who actually, I think his work has changed the whole way that we think about the Nazis as well as the US post-war period. So it's rare that, you meet someone whose work has just become consensus in a sense, right? I'm talking here about Blitzed, which was written 10 years ago. We're at the anniversary, and actually, before this, people didn't think about the Nazis and drugs, did they? What led you to actually write this story of how the Nazis were deeply involved in pharmacology, in drug development?
Well, the big joke of the book is that they actually were, and that they portrayed themselves always as teetotalers, and they were actually Germany's first anti-drug government. Yeah, so that was the Nazi propaganda, and that Nazi propaganda carried all the way through to the 80s, when I learned everything that was to learn about the so-called Third Reich in school or from my grandfather. Drugs never played a role. In contrast, the Nazis were obviously criticized for their horrible crimes, but then there was always, not always, but for example, from my grandfather, there was the notion that at least there were law and order people. Everyone was disciplined. It was clean. It was like the German stereotypes were really working at their best.
The Deutsche Tugend, right? The virtues.
The virtues. I mean, we had Chancellor Schmidt in the 70s saying, with those secondary virtues, you can also run a concentration camp perfectly. So, the virtues in themselves even are questionable, but that image of Hitler, of being this person without a private life, this person just serving the people, to expose that as a lie and as propaganda was part of the fun. And that fun, I mean, I had that hope when I heard that the Nazis took so many drugs. I didn't know it yet before I did the research. I just had hints. So when I then found out more and more, going into the archives, especially several archives across Germany and the United States, I became quite excited to tell this more truthful tale, actually, about how fascism worked in Germany.
And how it worked. I mean, your book's got a number of sections to it, Blitz in particular. Some of it is about Hitler. Quite a lot of it is about Hitler because you got access to his personal physician's notes, right? And the idea that he had no private life was complete nonsense. But there's some really shocking details in there, particularly about the cocktail of hormones that he was constantly injected on. What did you learn about Hitler that surprised you from this?
Well, it surprised me that he took a lot of drugs. And obviously that has consequences that no historian had ever looked at, because no historian had ever examined what he actually had taken. And looking at the notes of his personal physician, Theo Morell, was therefore very interesting, because I could suddenly paint a more accurate picture of the most examined personality in history. So that was a lot of fun, actually. I mean, just the process of being able to do that. What does it mean? What different picture did I come up with? Certainly is then the interesting outcome. And that's, I mean, I didn't have any agenda, or I was just curious to see what had actually happened. and without really judging it in a way. Because there's nothing really to judge about Hitler. I mean, this also the story that I tell in the end is the same story that we know. The Nazis are evil and they lose the war and they commit genocide and they commit all kinds of atrocities. And these crimes are not linked to their drug use. I mean, if I would have found that they were actually, quite decent, maybe right-wing politicians who then through drugs, went on the wrong path, that would have been, of course, a different story. But that's not the story that I was able to research. Luckily, I guess, or not luckily, it doesn't really matter. But for sure, it's a fact that the ideology of National Socialism has nothing to do with drugs. It's younger. It comes from it comes from Mein Kampf, Hitler's Bible, the National Socialist Bible, basically, which was written without being under the influence of drugs. Drugs come into focus much later in the game, especially after 1941, when the war against the Soviet Union proves to be quite difficult, and Hitler uses opioids for the first time, and then uses more and more drugs to stay in his Führer tunnel, basically to still have this charisma as a tool that he had actually naturally before that. He was very, as in Hollywood say, good in the room. He was able to convince people, but at a certain point in time during the war, it was basically impossible to convince the German high command that this way of leading the war was still working. But Hitler used one opioid, especially oxycodone, which now is known as oxycodone, to increase his mental capacities. Actually, while you're high on that drug, you're quite sharp and you're quite charismatic. You feel really good, and that well-being kind of transmits to other people who don't know why you're like in such a good mood. Like, I read a lot of reports from very high-ranking generals, obviously officers, that they were so surprised that Hitler was so confident. So they actually started believing that he must know something, like he knows the bigger picture. He knows about wonder weapons being in development, which could have been true. Could have been the nuclear bomb being almost ready, or some other weapon that they didn't know of. So Hitler was using those drugs quite smartly in a way. I mean, he did improve his performance through them, or at least the appearance of a performance. So he was often like an actor going onto the stage and being able to convince through his performance that his policies would be the ones to follow, because there was a lot of resistance against Hitler also. I mean, through the book Blitzed, I learned a lot about National Socialism. We all know
the big picture.
Yeah, the big picture, but the details are quite fascinating. So I became fascinated with that period. I had been fascinated before, but looking through the lens of drugs gave me an opportunity to really look at this group of men and how they interacted, and so it was the drugs. It's you cannot really tell that story without drugs, because Hitler was always on drugs after a certain point in time. I mean,
he was quite sickly, actually, right? This is what I picked up, one thing from your book, that he needed constant medical attention. I mean, and he wasn't that old either. So it seems like the pressures of leading the country into war, or possibly even just the side effects of various hormonal cocktails and other drugs that he was given, just really kind of caused problems for him that he had to fix with more drugs.
Well, you have to look at the kind of the patient history closely, and then you can see the development from basically a very healthy individual. There's one general, he summed it up saying Hitler looked until some year, like 1939, I think it was, that this guy said he looked younger than he actually was. Then from 39 to 41, he looked kind of his age. And then after that, he aged quite quickly. And that had to do with the medications that he was taking. Until 41, he was basically using vitamins and things that we supplements, things that we all use now. Maybe not as sophisticated as we do it now because we know more. But basically, Morell, his personal physician, was a supplement freak, and that was kind of new. He was a very innovative guy. This doctor, he was into probiotics, which no one talked about at the time. He was able to cure Hitler's constant bloating problems. So Hitler really created a trust in this doctor. And then in 1941, when he was sick for the first time since they had been together since 1936, first time in 5 years, he was sick in August, not able to get out of bed during a crucial phase of the campaign against the Soviet Union. And he demanded from Morell to get something stronger than just vitamins, and that was an opioid. And then he took a liking to opioids, and then they became quite experimental, these two guys. Hitler was an expert in everything, at least he believed so. So this was a new kind of hobby for him. How could he improve his performance even more? And he was conscious, he said it a few times, that he had to take so many decisions in such a short time. He was really like a high, he was taking a lot of decisions.
Yeah, he was a very powerful person,
very
right?
powerful because it was all tailored to him. There was no delegation. He was micromanaging everything. Like he was getting on the officers' nerves by talking about how long soldiers should sleep and what pillow they should use. Like he was, his mind was racing and was never stopping. And that he tried to improve that by taking more and more experimental medications. And at the time, for example, that's a phase from 1941 to 1943. That was the big experimental phase when they did a lot of animal concoctions. So Hitler was not really a vegetarian at all, because he injected pig's liver extract. I guess if you do that, you're not a vegetarian anymore. But he didn't even realize that. So, he knew what he was taking, but he didn't realize, for example, that he was taking drugs or for him, it was just medication that would enable him to do the work better for the German people. So Morell had he built up his own kind of one-man pharmaceutical empire in occupied Czechoslovakia, where he had one chemist, where one chemist was working, cooking up new stuff.
And he also was given kind of crazy access to all of the slaughterhouses of Ukraine, right?
Well, yeah, the idea was that in animals are very potent parts, like glands within the brain of animals, or like organs, which are, powerful substances. So he had, but also, you have to know a lot about it. And Morell, he tried out a lot. So
he was a total cowboy.
Kind of. He really liked the Ukraine, when Germany had occupied the Ukraine, because the Ukraine had a very sophisticated slaughterhouse regime. The slaughterhouses in Ukraine were on a higher level than in Germany and even in the United States. Like they had invested in slaughterhouses, and they were able to separate the organs of the slaughtered animals from the desired meat. And so Morell made sure that all the organs with all the hormones that the animals were producing were being sent with military trains back from the Ukraine to his company in occupied Czech, and then turned into medicines that would boost your energy level. Basically, that was the idea. And at the time, it was not very easy. It was actually impossible in 1943 to bring a new medicine onto the market, because today we have the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 tests that medicines have to go through. They also had something like this in Germany. And during the war, there was a war economy with certain regulations. It was not possible to do these tests because it was all tailored towards the war. So Morell was frustrated, and he related this problem to Hitler. And then Hitler said, kind of Trump style, he just said, I'm just going to use it. And if it's good for me, then it's good for everybody. So Hitler voluntarily became the guinea pig of his doctor and was using crazy stuff. And I read reports of especially the pig's livers. They had to be cooled. This was very hot in Eastern Europe in the summer. So these livers are in containers and huge containers, like lots of wagons of train, like huge quantities of pig's livers, taking days to get from the Ukraine in the war situation to Czechoslovakia, and then they opened it in Czechoslovakia and they were already like smelling quite bad, but then they would sterilize them and make them into ampules and send them to Hitler, and he was putting it into his vein. And so that was really unhealthy for him, which he didn't realize, or maybe he did and he didn't care. Or I mean, National Socialism is a self-destructive movement because fascism hates the other. And why do you hate the other? Because you have a problem with yourself, basically. So Hitler self-destructed. It was not like Morell was like plotting to destroy Hitler's health. It was kind of Hitler doing it together with Morell to himself. And so that caused probably autoimmune diseases like Parkinson's. Like Hitler's health really degenerated after 1944. So it takes a while, you take for over years. He got an injection every day. So with some weird stuff.
He was very dependent on Morell,
healthy.
right? Like in your book, there's a lot of accounts of him just calling up Morell at crazy times of the night and just needing him at every beck and call. And it almost reminded me of someone like Michael Jackson, one of these very famous figures who have a personal doctor. And there's clearly a relationship imbalance there where the powerful is very reliant on drugs and the person who gives them the drugs.
It's very dangerous to have a personal physician that gives you everything if you are in a stressful position and if you like drugs, like Hitler really liked drugs. He also came upon cocaine at one point after Operation Valkyrie because he had blown eardrums. And then another doctor, in German, we say HNO doctor.
Yeah, health and wait.
What do you say
throat?
in English?
Ear, mouth, throat, something like that.
Ears, nose,
yeah,
and throat.
I think
specialist. He came in because Morell was just a general practitioner. So this new guy came in and he was using cocaine to numb the pain in the ears. And Hitler immediately kind of realized, oh, this is an interesting drug. Maybe he had read something about cocaine. So he asked already during the first visit to have cocaine also being applied to his nose. So the Giesing was this military doctor. He was a bit shocked. Also how Hitler looked, like he had never seen Hitler. And there's very nice reports that he wrote afterwards to the American intelligence after the war, when like Hitler would walk in for the first time and he basically saw a wreck coming, like in pajamas and like slippers and then this guy demanded cocaine and said, for the first time I can think clearly again. And then he wanted cocaine all the time. And then Giese had to kind of say no to Hitler and was fired, basically. So Morell, Hitler was dependent on Morell, but Morell was also dependent on Hitler. Like they were codependent. They had a toxic, in the truest sense of the word, relationship. And that's kind of the fun of the book, to read about that relationship, because it's really sick. It's really nice to see how they both kind of go down together.
Of course. I mean, it's a very well-written book. I think your background as a novelist probably helps that, right? And the way that you constructed the story so that it was, because it's not just about Hitler and Morell, it's also about how certain individuals, there's records of other drugs in use, in particular one, Pervitin, which we would now call methamphetamine, right? Or just amphetamine. Methamphetamine. And so really it's about how his doctor drugged Hitler, but also how Hitler and the Nazis drugged many of the Germans, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, the methamphetamine story is a big part of Blitzed. There was one smallish paper, academic paper, a 2-page paper about the methamphetamine use of the German army. And that was it. That was out there, basically. And it claimed in the end that the Blitzkrieg was only possible through the use of methamphetamine, which is something I'd never heard of.
Yeah.
And I visited this academic who had done this research at the University of Ulm, and then he was generous enough to tell me where exactly I had to look in the military archive of Germany for the full story that he just didn't have time to research. So that is the second kind of big story in Blitzed, is the story of how a whole military apparatus drugged itself with methamphetamine. For example, when Germany invaded France, 35 million dosages of methamphetamine were swallowed, and had tremendous success through that campaign, through that drug use, but also then in the end repercussions, because methamphetamine is not really a sustainable substance. I mean, it gives you a strong high, but it also gives you a strong come down. And that was a little bit underestimated by the German military apparatus, which is also fun to examine, what exactly happened.
Yeah, because I think the Blitzkrieg was actually one of the most surprising aspects of the Nazi war of conquest of France, because everyone thought that the French had such a great army, and there were all these lines. Of course, that was also the Maginot Line in the First World War, and the Germans just overran them, right? And your book argues that so much of that was because the German tank drivers just didn't need to sleep.
Well, there was no strategy to attack the West, but Hitler really wanted to attack the West. But that was an irrational decision that he had made, and High Command had blocked him over months after the victory against Poland, which started the Second World War. They were kind of content, and they said, we cannot win against the West like we won against Poland. It's impossible. But then there was a meeting in February where 3 tank generals, one of them, the later famous Rommel, Tank General Rommel, said to Hitler, we're not going to go through the Maginot Line in the south, and we're not going to go through North Belgium. This is what happened. Those were the attack points. The First World War, which led to a 4-year stalemate where nobody basically won except the soldiers lost their lives. This was the big fear. This would happen again. We go through the Ardennes Mountains, which is kind of the eye of the needle. It's a mountainous range in Belgium, and which was not heavily fortified by the Western Allies, because they didn't think that a whole army would fit through that eye over the needle. It was a crazy plan, and it was crazy because a military cannot really move so fast, so they would get stuck. They would, at night you have to set up your camp, and by the time, you set up your camp and rest for the night until the next morning you march again, news would have spread to the British and French defenders, and then they would have come and crushed the German army in the pincer movement. So it was a completely insane plan, basically. But because the Germans had methamphetamine, I mean, it was kind of luck, because Hitler said, yeah, we'll do this. And then the generals also, they didn't know about methamphetamine yet, or they knew maybe about it from the Polish campaign, but it was still kind of vague. This was 3 months before it actually happened. So they were like, they said, this is the only problem. We have to continue marching at night for 3 days and 3 nights. Then we reach France quicker than the French and British can kind of retreat, because they were actually standing closer to the German border, so we would be in their back, and if we were in their back, we can cut them off. This was what Churchill then called the sickle cut. But general said, the only problem is it's very hard to stay awake for that period of time. No army has ever done this. And then Hitler said, yeah, but the German soldiers is superhuman. Of course he can stay awake. I stayed awake for a week in the First World War. Like, this was kind of Hitler thinking, or Hitler propaganda. But then actually what happened was that they evolved a methamphetamine program between February and May 10th when they attacked. So millions of pills. There was tests before, like how long does it actually keep you up? And then they, thought it could work. So there was one guy, professor, who was responsible for developing this program. Ranke is his name, and his papers are all in military archives. So you can actually really see how he did it. And this is it's an interesting story. It's amazing to see how actually that pharmacological weapon, as he called it, was deployed, and then he had to write a stimulant decree which went to all the medical officers, so they had to learn how to give the methamphetamine, how many pills at what interval, what are the effects. And then it really worked. It worked like a charm, basically. And so the Germans invented a new form of warfare, which was chemically enhanced warfare. And the French and the British, they were like totally old school. They were still fighting First World War. They were like, what are these guys doing? They didn't understand the velocity of the approach, and also the erratic behavior which comes with excessive methamphetamine use. If you go to a club after 3 days and 3 nights, people are just they behave differently, and an enemy that behaves completely differently than you expect the enemy to behave is very hard to deal with. So the French, they kind of collapsed. Like they were just mentally not able to cope with this enemy. Also, methamphetamine makes you fearless. So the German soldiers were like, after a few days, everyone was afraid of them because they were not afraid of anything. So it was really very effective strategy that.
And particularly with the tanks as well, right? There was the tank drivers who.
Yeah, that was another idea that I wasn't there, but what the general said, we will use the tanks as the avant-garde of the movement. Usually, I guess the tanks were used kind of as a backup. They were like slow, but they said the tanks are actually not slow, and they're not slow. They can go quite fast. A tank can go, I don't know, 40, 50 kilometers an hour, which is fast. If you go through rugged terrain, it's much faster than any movement of any other unit of the military. So that was the idea, to use the tanks in the forefront, put all the meth in the tanks, and use the tanks kind of as crazy race cars, charging into enemy territory. It's a totally insane plan, and it totally worked.
I know that's the most insane part, I think, because it sounds like a fever dream. And then look what happened. One of the best respected armies in the world got defeated so quickly, and Germany managed to take most of Europe, right? Almost all of Europe, actually.
Yeah, it was an amazing victory, which produced some of the first war crimes also. You have to, not...
Of course,
be careful not to glorify what they did. They were basically committing a huge crime by invading a foreign territory, killing people on the way. There's reports of Rommel being totally high on crystal meth. That's why I call him Crystal Fox, making the British love him, call him the Desert Fox. It's like this folk hero in Great Britain.
He actually is, right? Because my grandfather, I believe, fought against Rommel at some point, and they were
Africa, probably.
In Africa, exactly. And my dad spoke quite proudly. They were chasing Rommel across Africa and stuff. And he was respected as almost like a decent old school general, not like a crazy Nazi one. But
yeah, he wasn't a Nazi. That's also interesting. I mean, quite a few people from the German Wehrmacht were not Nazis. They were high-ranking officers coming from Prussian families, highly intellectual people. But they also got caught up, in this rush, in this intoxication of war. And Rommel did commit war crimes already in France. There's one situation when he was charging at night, and he was going through a village where the French had basically set up camp, because the French also had a drug of choice, which was red wine. Red wine had been used in the First World War quite successfully by the French, because the First World War was very different. You were in the trench, it was cold, it was raining. You needed some kind of booster, so you drank a nice pot of red wine in the evening, at least, and then you could sleep better, But that was, and so when they realized we're being attacked again, it's happening again. I write the precise numbers in the book. I think it was 3,400 tanks, lorries, trucks filled with red wine were moving from the French wine regions to the front lines, and every French soldier was allocated 3/4 of a liter of red wine per day.
Wow, that's more than a bottle, isn't it? It's a couple of bottles, I think. Or
well, no, one bottle is about 3/4 of a liter.
Okay, it's like a bottle of wine a day.
It's a lot of wine.
Yeah,
so you drink this bottle of wine in the evening, then you sleep, obviously. So they were sleeping in this village, and Rommel with his guys high on meth, charging through, and they didn't even see, they didn't even, they couldn't even stop. So there's reports where the tanks run over sleeping soldiers, and that's kind of when the Wehrmacht was always very proud to be this noble military apparatus with high standards, highly intelligent people. But they lost it. They lost it in the intoxication of victory, and you can see this with Rommel. But Rommel then, I think he's still respected by the British, for example, because at one point he turned against Hitler. There were quite a few generals that turned against Hitler at one point in the Russian campaign when they realized this guy's a madman. But it took the high command quite a while after this amazing victory against the West, that kind of lifted Hitler to the status of a saint. He's a military genius.
Yeah,
even though it wasn't Hitler's idea with the meth, but he probably didn't even know about it. There's the stimulant decree is signed by the highest officer, von Brauchitsch, and probably he would correspond everything he does with Hitler, but Hitler's signature is not on the stimulant decree. So I don't know. I don't even think he really understood what was going on.
I mean, he believed his own bullshit, right? He thought, I am here to save the German nation and also to take over Europe and turn it into our Lebensraum. And he believed that even up to a point where it was clearly not going to work. The fact that he got so far, I think, is almost one of these shocks of history, which only happened because of a couple of things. Very unlikely things went right for them and wrong for everyone else, right? At one point, I think this was in your book, the French army goes into Germany or the Saarland and then just stops, and no one knows why it stops, right? Because they were quite vulnerable when they were attacking Poland, and they went to the...
Yeah, that's true. When Germany attacked Poland, the West could have attacked Germany from the West, but didn't do so. That was a big, I think, complaint also of the Polish that the West didn't step in at all, actually.
Yeah, we call it the phony war in England, the first 9 months, 1.5 years, I think, where actually we had, the war had been declared.
Right, but
no one did anything.
No fighting took place.
Yeah.
Because the German army after the Polish campaign was quite weak, even though they won, they had to renew a lot of machinery, and the people were tired, and also they were coming down from the meth, because already in Poland they were using a lot of meth. It wasn't official yet, so people were using it privately, but the army was quite tired in a way, so that would have been a good moment to attack. But the West was still thinking it could contain Hitler. That is the big Chamberlain mistake.
Yeah.
And I think he was still Prime Minister of England until May of 1940, when then Churchill came, and he was a very aggressive, much more aggressive than Chamberlain.
Sure, yeah. Churchill had a long history, right, in the First World War. He was also behind quite a disastrous campaign in Gallipoli, where he just kept sending soldiers even though they were being wiped out, right? So he was quite controversial.
Churchill was also a war criminal,
Sure.
He's just the lesser evil war criminal,
Yeah, I believe they also dropped gas on Kurdish tribes. I think Churchill was involved in that in the First World War. I would need to check. So just on the Panzer, of course, Panzer is the German word for tank. And I wonder, because I've heard people refer to speed in recent years, to methamphetamine, as Panzer Schokolade. So tank chocolate. Does that come from anywhere, or was it because it was in the rations next to the chocolate? Because the Pervitin, that was pills, right?
Yeah, Pervitin is a pill with 3 milligrams of methamphetamine being made by the Temmler company. There were chocolates on the market, but they were mostly they were advertised for housewives. They were by a company called Hildebrand, and the Nazis had the policies policy basically of gender separation. The women should stay at home and take care of the house and the children, and so at least they got the meth chocolate, so they're more thorough with cleaning the home and happy. It's kind of a mother's little helper for the woman who doesn't have any political rights. So that's the meth chocolate that was popular in Germany. And one little chocolate piece contained 9 milligrams of meth, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, 3 times as much as the army pills. So they really had ship-shape houses, probably.
But I try to solve that, but I don't know. I mean, there is still a chocolate on the market today in Germany which contains caffeine, and it has a round box, a round tin, and that was already on the market back then and was, I think, used by tank people. But I think that, I mean, to my knowledge, to my research, they just took the pills, which were called also the pilots took the pills, and the pills were called for the pilots Göring's Salz, the salt of Göring. So maybe they call the pills chocolate. I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe candies or
like I think it's kind of a joke name, probably.
Yeah, it's a joke name. I didn't see like special chocolate being manufactured for the tanks with methamphetamine in it. I never saw that.
I always wanted to ask you that, and I wonder as well. You know, this was a book which has, I think, gone from kind of shocking at the time to consensus internationally, in a sense, because now if you change the mentality of how people viewed the Nazis in a certain way with this, which is quite an accomplishment. But I wonder what was the response in Germany like, where there is a lot of history about the Nazis, but it's obviously quite an uncomfortable topic, and it's one which there's a lot of like moralistic elements. Sometimes you can't say this, you can't say that. Have people told you can't say that?
Well, I expected more, to be honest, but people were just kind of overwhelmed by the book and couldn't say anything against it somehow. Der Spiegel, Germany's supposedly leading magazine, they had a big story on it when the book came out saying, oh, this is all like nothing new. We all knew this, which is total crap because no one knew it, especially not the Spiegel. Otherwise, they would have reported on it long before. They were kind of pissed that they didn't find it out. I had the luck, or I guess, it was just a fact that the leading historian on National Socialism in Germany, Hans Mommsen, was a supporter of the book. He wrote not a foreword, but
like a blurb.
No, he actually wrote what's the opposite to a foreword? An afterword?
Yeah, something like that.
Like an epilogue.
Epilogue.
He wrote an epilogue.
I was going to say suffix, but
to the book. So that was support from like the Germans, from like the leading German historians, which was quite helpful. And then
he must have been very old at that point.
Yeah, he was quite old, but he was still helping me a lot with the research.
Wow.
I showed him all the stuff, and he was quite amazed. And he said that this explains performance shifts within Hitler that historians have not really been able to explain. After 1943, especially when Hitler's decisions become quite bad for the German military, quite good in a way because he kind of lost it. So it was kind of a mystery to historians why he went down like this, why he couldn't keep it up like he was able to do so before.
Yeah.
So Mommsen was very supportive, and then also Ian Kershaw, the leading British historian on Hitler, who has written an amazing biography on Hitler. He's praised the book, so that was quite important. So having the praise of these historians kind of took the wind maybe out of the sails of people who could have criticized. It was not really criticized a lot.
I did see some criticism in The Guardian by a guy, Richard J. Evans, who's a Cambridge historian. I think he's written a few pieces criticizing the book. He even said it was dangerous. I could tell he really didn't like it.
He hates it. He hates it because he didn't find it himself, because he's next to Kershaw, the other leading. Well, it's funny, actually. You could write a little piece on British historians, experts on National Socialism, because Britain won against Germany. So the history is always told by the winner. And there's like a few like high-ranking British historians who know everything about National Socialism, even though most of them can't speak German. So it's kind of hard for them to read the original documents, I would imagine. But still, they are good. Kershaw is great. I don't know if he speaks German, but his book's great. But Evans is not really. He's not really good. I never read anything of him that I like. I gave a speech once, a keynote at the World War II conference in New Orleans, which is like America's World War II conference with like thousands of delegates. And the keynote was amazing because I talked about my hometown, and which was an American base when I
Where
grew
are you
up in Zweibrücken in West Germany. It was like the logistical headquarters of the U.S. Army in Western Europe. And afterwards, he was also there, and he said, "Yeah, good keynote, but still the book is not good." He just can't allow an outsider to come into his playground. It would be the same as if someone who'd never written a book writes the greatest novel, and novelists would say, "Oh, that's really bad. Yeah, it's ridiculous," But he's a small-minded man.
Interesting. Yeah, because he said it was dangerous. I actually read the review before I read the book in full.
It's a dangerous review, actually, because it cuts down the sales, because people actually believe that he's right.
Well, I think it sold very, very well, despite, or maybe because of the review.
Maybe, yeah.
But he said it was dangerous because it kind of takes the agency away from the evil of the Nazis, which is not what I picked up at all from the book.
No, and it's an argument you could make, but it doesn't really correspond to what I have written. So maybe he didn't really read the book thoroughly enough. Maybe he just kind of saw like, oh, there's this German guy, he's not a historian, he just writes, the Nazis took all these drugs, and then maybe that kind of lessens their responsibility or something. Like, I think he was like reading in his mind the book that he really hated. It's not the book I've written, and I elaborated on it before when I said, that the ideology and the crimes and the planning and all of this has nothing to do with drugs.
Yeah. I felt, the tone of the book was, I always like kind of polemical books. For me, what I want from a book is there's an argument, right? And a lot of books lack that, especially historical books. And I felt like you were, arguing the case that drugs played a role, a major role. You might disagree with some of the conclusions, but I thought it was clearly there was this argument, and that's what I like from nonfiction books, when they have an argument at the gist of it. But I guess you were sort of the ingenue who came in not even having written a nonfiction book before at this point, because you were a novelist, right? And I think initially this book was planning on being fictional.
Yeah, for me it was normal to write a novel about this. Only my publisher, smart as he was at the time, said you should write a nonfiction book, because in a novel it's not really about the topic.
It's about the characters, the relationships.
Yeah. And Hitler and Morell are terrible characters in a novel, because you can't really what do you want to invent? I had so much juicy, real stuff, and then I invented scenes, and it was just flatter than the actual stuff. The juice. It wasn't so as juicy as the facts. So it was the right decision to write a nonfiction book. The only challenge then was to write a non-boring nonfiction book, which I then, that was a literary task that was interesting to me, because I'm a writer. I find it, I like challenges, and that was the craft challenge for me to write a nonfiction book that is academically researched, but still reads like a novel. But it's a fine line, because you can also be so eloquent in your storytelling that people just believe what you write. And I think that sometimes maybe also Evans would hated that, because if you write a academic book, it
should be dry.
It should be kind of dry and boring, because you don't it's only about the facts. But I don't really agree. I think even a book that really sticks to the facts, like maybe this other one we can talk about for a second, Bohemians,
Sure.
which is the story of two people in Berlin, and then suddenly fascism comes, and they created the largest resistance network against the Nazis, Harro and Libertas, the Bohemians, it's called in English, because they were Bohemians. That was the challenge, because I wanted to write a nonfiction book about them, like invent nothing, but still it should read like a novel, because if it doesn't read like a novel, then no one's going to read it, you know?
Sure.
But then also you don't want to invent anything. Like that's when Anthony Beaver, who was kind of my mentor at the time, he said to just don't invent anything. So don't invent anything, but write it as well as you can. So that kind of, you have to balance that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of the trend in nonfiction books now, in a sense, which is quite a recent trend. I read a great one called The Prosecutor recently about Fritz Bauer, who was one of the anti-Nazi prosecutors after the war. And I know that I've interviewed the author, and he spent years researching it, and then you have to leave so much out so that
Who's the author?
Jack Fairweather. Really recommend the book. And you have to do so much so that you can get enough research, so you can get enough juicy details. Because, well, I mean, not everyone is Hitler, right? Almost any detail about Hitler is fascinating. You've called Hitler like the most examined person in history, but I feel like he's still such a mystery, right? Where does this madness come from? Where does this self-belief, this crazy Jew hatred, like pathological? I've also heard theories that he had, which I think is quite credible, that he had ADHD. Because he was...
Maybe, I don't know. It's possible, yeah.
Apparently, he would be sometimes so energetic and so charismatic, and a lot of the time he was also very lazy and didn't do any paperwork. He was disorganized, but then also micromanaging, What do you think you learned about Hitler's personality from the research, other than that he became very dependent on this doctor?
I don't know. I mean, the fascist character is interesting because the fascist character is coming back now. It's the non-psychedelic character, I would say.
What do you mean by that?
It's someone who doesn't at all question him or herself, who's too afraid. Basically, it's a character of fear. Unable to deal with criticism, just like Trump. Like Trump is not really the president of the Americans; he's only the president of his supporters. As soon as you criticize a person like that, everything falls apart, and the person becomes aggressive. And in the Nazis' case, or in Hitler's case, like there was one time, the wife of Baldur von Schirach, who had formed the Hitler Jugend, the Hitler Youth movement, very important part of the so-called Third Reich, and she was having dinner with Hitler with her husband in the Berghof, his mountain retreat, and she said, "Well, we're just coming back from Holland, and we saw what the occupying German forces are doing to the Jews there. It's really horrible. I mean, they're like treating them not as humans." And Hitler is totally freaked out. Like he did not look at this woman anymore. He just made a sign that she should be removed from the table.
Wow!
And they were never allowed again, to dine with him. So that is the fascist character.
And it's interesting that these characters are so good at attracting support as well, right? Like Trump, he's got a cult of personality. Hitler had a cult of personality.
It addresses the lowest, or not what it addresses character traits that seem to be human, or that they are obviously human, but they're not really what we should be proud of as being human. I think as humans we should be proud if we are able to connect, and if we're able to see the bigger picture, that we're actually all one, and that we are a crazy, fragile but highly intelligent species living on this planet, and somehow we should be able to work out a solution that everyone can live happily and has some kind of the same wealth and resources and freedom. That's what I think makes us human. But there's also this other side of us humans, which is the fear, is aggression, is
hierarchy,
yeah,
order.
hierarchy. It's very sad, that we still have this, and that it's now even in power in the most powerful country on earth.
And may end up in power in Germany again, right? In 10 years, maybe?
No, I don't think so, because I decided to become Chancellor in 2033.
Fantastic. That's maybe a scoop for this podcast. You know who you're going to be running against? There's a rapper called Massive.
He's also announced it?
Yeah, he's going to be Chancellor in 10 years. So,
Well, we have elections in 8 years.
Okay.
So maybe I win in 8 years, and then
you give up and give away the
maybe.
chancellery.
I don't think so. I will be very successful.
Good. Well, no,
Yeah.
seriously, are you thinking of a future in politics?
Yeah.
Yeah? For which party?
I would create my own party. I
Interesting.
will enter with this new party the Bundestag in 4 years. So I will get over the 5%, which is possible. And then in 8 years, 100 years after Hitler won the seat of Chancellor, I think probably my party will be the second strongest after the AfD. Probably AfD will be strongest party, but will not have absolute majority.
No.
So I will form a coalition, probably with the left or the Green Party, even though the Green Party's moved towards the right. But maybe they could still, I would still accept them in my coalition if they make me Chancellor. And then I would really, turn this country around. I would basically destroy this country. That's why I would want to be Chancellor, because I want to dismantle the nation state system that is keeping the hierarchies, and so yeah, that's kind of my campaign in a nutshell. I will rule Germany in order to do kind of similar to Hitler. Actually, he destroyed Germany, but I will destroy it. I will dismantle it in a gentle way.
Do you? Because this is actually a topic quite close to my heart. Because I sometimes think, why is there still a Germany after everything that went wrong, that they did wrong? Would you divide it into different states? Or just would Bavarian independence, Saxon independence, just anarchy somehow?
No, not anarchy. I mean, we have to acknowledge that we have identities which are closely connected to our culture and our language. And is very important to humans, and we should all respect that. But many people feel that is disrespected, and that's why they're so much against foreigners. Like they see this as a threat. So it seems to be something that is really important to people. And also, I come from a small town in West Germany, which is part of a state, and people speak the same dialect, and I relate to these people. And that's all totally fine. I just think that the abuse of power by the nation states, which we are experiencing right now in the world, has to be balanced by a planetary. Basically, we are moving towards a planetary society, and there will be a planetary society maybe in 20 years, maybe in 100 years. But there will be a different system, and the nation states will still exist, but they will not. They will. Right now, we just have narratives. We have nationalistic narratives, basically. We are now here in Germany, or we're now over there in England, or this is America. Maybe we have a Western narrative, but it's sharply separated from the Russian and the Eastern, the Chinese, and or the Arab narrative. We need a human narrative, and because we need to see that we actually are all on the same level, and every human should have the right to live everywhere on this planet without disturbing, without being a threat, because people have always moved around. Like, we are moving people, we are migrating people. We come from Africa, we moved into what we call now the Middle East through that Levantine corridor. We then colonized, settled in Europe, and when we went to Asia. Like, we are moving. So now I would like to say, like, someone now from Africa cannot come to Europe. It's totally ridiculous. Of course, everyone can come to Europe, and I can live in Thailand. We need a planetary system with a basic, probably minimum income for everybody, and we need to reallocate the resources, and billionaires should be outlawed. And because we have so much wealth, it's just a complete fuck up through capitalism. Capitalism must go. We must find a new way, which of course will still have capitalist. That the drive. If I do a lot, I can get a lot. I mean, that's important. That's an incentive. So that obviously should stay. And socialism, as it was attempted by the Soviet Union and its satellites, was certainly not a better alternative than the capitalism that we have right now. But there must be, and there will be another way of organizing, because people are quite good in organizing. We have a lot of new technologies at our disposal, including artificial intelligence, which is not bad in itself. It seems to be bad right now, like everyone thinks it's bad, but it's not really bad. It can also be good. It can be a tool, but not how it is used right now. And it will come. So we have to use it in a good way. We have to use plants in a good way. We have to get rid of governments basically telling us how we can strengthen our brains, which is what the war on drugs is trying to do. So I see a lot of, in German we say Raum nach oben.
Sure, or Luft nach oben. Yeah, there's room to improve.
Yeah, we have a lot of room to improve, and being Chancellor of Germany will put me in a very powerful position to bring about change.
Do you have a name for your party yet? Bündnis Norman Ohler?
No. That's not good. It must be a big movement that is not focused on me. It could also be someone else. Yeah. But I do not have a name yet, and also I also mourn the prospect of doing it, because I think I could win. I think I have a chance. But that also would mean that from now on, I only talk about this. And that's kind of horribly boring. I want to continue writing books, and I have a new book in the process, which is called Stone Sapiens, which is a new world history, which kind of talks about the stuff that I just kind of talked about.
And then the drugs as well, right? How drugs are part of human consciousness.
Well, drugs are basically part of our development always from the beginning. If sapiens would never have used psychoactive plants, like the Neanderthals probably didn't. There's no real evidence that they did, so they died out because they were too sober for the future. Basically, we really were able to get smarter and transcend and move on, and we used very powerful medicines to do that. So we would not sit here right now without drugs. Really, we would have died out long ago. So it creates a completely different understanding of who we actually are as a species. That book.
It's kind of the stoned ape theory, right?
That's a small part of it. Yeah, but it's the idea. But it's not only about how the frontal cortex evolved, which is because of a certain drug, which I cannot give away because you have to read the book, or you have to read my Substack. I'm writing a Stone Sapiens Substack right now, where you can kind of see how the book evolves and where texts are being already issued, creating a community. So I would encourage.
I'm a subscriber, so already a subscriber.
Do you like it?
I do like it. I feel like you travel a lot. And that's the main thing I pick up. It's usually like the only German in Tel Aviv or New York, or I'm like, wow, he's traveling a lot. So this is the main info I get. But I enjoy.
I'm creating a planetary network, so I have to travel. I have to meet people.
Interesting. Well, good luck to you.
Yeah. So it's writing. It's creating. Like, writers have the talent, some of them at least, to create narratives that might inspire others. And I think we need narratives that go beyond what I call the national discourse or the Western discourse. We need inspiring narratives that show us that there's actually a good future possible.
I think we're very far away from that, though, right?
We are very far away.
Yeah,
we're terribly far away, and a lot of suffering will happen before we get there. But I don't think this is currently. I don't think this is the end. I mean, this seems like the end. It seems like the apocalypse, but there will be other stages. I don't think we're going to die out in the next 20 years. I think we will have huge wars and problems, but I think we will be able to also have it's a revolutionary situation right now. We need a planetary revolution, and I think it's coming.
Interesting. We heard this here first, I think, that Norman Ohler will be German Chancellor soon-ish. And
8 years.
8 years, yeah. Well, that's better start soon because it takes a while. But also, I would say, with all of the wars that are happening at the moment and national discourse on migration and stuff, do you really think... Well, I mean, what's your position? I know, for example, you met Yasser Arafat, right? Quite briefly before he died. I think you're also one of the few German public figures, intellectuals who has been supportive of Palestine. What do you think of the national discourse on this topic here?
That's very interesting because it's kind of sad that, my position basically is that there is a historical responsibility for us Germans towards Israel. And I take that quite seriously. I find Israel fascinating. I've lived there for a while. I had a partner, she's a writer in Tel Aviv. And but for me, it was also always totally natural to cross to the other side and see the occupied territories. So I was this was actually 20 years ago, even though it feels like today, like yesterday sometimes. Quite long ago that I would use my German passport to cross back and forth. I was in Ramallah during the day, and then at night I would meet my girlfriend in Tel Aviv. And not many people were able to do that. Israelis are not allowed really into the occupied territories, and Palestinians are not really allowed into Israel. So I find the whole region extremely fascinating, and the region is also very, very attractive. Like it really feels like that this is a navel of the world. Not the only navel, but it is a node. It has so much culture. It's so rich in intellect and in many things. So I find it highly tragic what is happening right now, and so I find it totally normal to speak about it, and I find it highly unfortunate that many people think that you can only speak about it in one way by supporting Israel. I mean, it's changing right now. Slowly there's change that you can voice, criticism of Israel. And I think it's totally necessary, because what's going on is absolutely horrendous. And if you see Israel as our friend, maybe even closest friend, or very good friend, let's say very good friend, I think you have the responsibility also to be honest to your friend and support your friend, obviously. But also, if your friend makes big mistakes, you should be able to say it. And I think that could be also the role of German intellectuals, to not be afraid of being canceled. Or I just don't accept it when I criticize the right-wing extremist criminal government of Israel, who is, being investigated by, the International Criminal Court, which is a body that I respect. I don't accept it if I voice my opinion about that I'm being. No one has labeled me an anti-Semite yet, but some people, I think it happened to them. Like
Sure,
it's
lots of people.
It's this kind of nature. It's this kind of trick, Like you're not allowed to say something against Israel because immediately you're being labeled an anti-Semite. I just don't accept that. So I say whatever I want.
Yeah,
I'm very open about it, and
I think with some intellectuals there might be, or public figures with this fear, there might be a bit of a nice German word, vorauseilende Gehorsamkeit. So
yeah, that's horrible. Actually, I mean, that's
preemptive.
Yeah, that is kind of fascist. So I think actually criticizing Israel, if you think it should be criticized, that is anti-fascist, that is free, that is democracy, that is what Israel, benefits from, because it is, supposedly a democracy. It wants to be a democracy, at least, officially it wants to be a democracy.
Sure, but one that commits apartheid, arguably, and occupation of its neighbors. So we should also remember Palestine as well, right? Which is somewhere
Well,
you've
I
been
love
to.
Palestine, even though I'm so much against nation states. I'm not even sure I'm pro a Palestinian state, because I'm against states in general. But I think the Palestinian people certainly deserve a place where they can be, in peace and organize themselves just like everyone else. And if they desire a state and everyone else has a state, I think they should have a state. And I think it's kind of ridiculous that this right-wing German government we have right now does not recognize Palestine. I mean, what's going on here? That's really foul. And I think this German Chancellor Merz is completely out of place. I think he should step back immediately. I think he's just a very vile person. I have no respect for this chancellor whatsoever.
Why is that? What in
Because
specifically?
he's a right-wing, soulless political, puppet. It's not. He doesn't have any kind of vision that I like. He doesn't make me happy with his decisions or how he's presenting himself. Like he makes me ashamed to be a German. Like, this is my chancellor. My God. I mean,
Have you felt that way about a chancellor before? I mean, Scholz and Merkel were the last two.
Scholz is kind of the same, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, Merz is a little bit more evil than Scholz.
He's more right-wing, for sure.
Yeah, it's more right-wing, yeah. So, and I don't like right-wing because I'm really against the Nazis. And also, like, there were reasons why the Nazis came to power, because the established political parties at the time, the CDU was called the Zentrumspartei.
Yeah, the Catholic party was almost, right?
They were saying yes to the Ermächtigungsgesetz, the law that actually enabled Hitler to take power in this totalitarian fashion. So they were, and you see it now with Merz. He's like saying more and more right-wing things, because he thinks then that maybe that will kind of get the AfD voters back to the CDU. And I think that's so foul. He should just leave the CDU and go to the AfD or whatever. I have no respect for the CDU. It was always a party that I deeply loathed. Merkel, when Merkel became chancellor, I was also like, I had no sympathy for her whatsoever, and I still don't really have sympathy for her, but she was on the left side of the CDU, and she made things that I think were good. Like, she said, we can take the refugees, they should all come. We need to change Germany. That was good. That was good thinking that Merz would never do. She closed down the nuclear power station. So she was in a way a social democrat in a CDU kind of.
That's what her opponents would say, right? And of course, she was in coalition with the Social Democrats for so much of her government.
It was kind of a pure social democratic government in a way, but I mean that's also not enough. We need more, much more left. I don't know if left is the right word. We need.
Well, the left party are doing quite well at the moment, right? In the
polls, because all of the other parties are moving to the right, so they're completely unsupportable. So the only party right now that's left is the left.
Sure, but then, most people aren't left-wing. Most people are either center-right, center. Some people, there's quite a lot of right-wing people. I mean, look at the AfD. It's, I think, 28% of the polls. That's, how do you feel about that?
Well, I feel like moving to Thailand and just not becoming German chancellor, because why would I kind of invest all this time and energy into saving this horrible German Volk? I'm not a big fan of Germany. I despise seeing all these unhappy faces in the subway. Not despise, but
it can be, the atmosphere can be a little oppressive at times, right?
Yeah, Germany is like a joke. It's like everyone's kind of making the jokes about how how the Germans are, but they actually are like this, and I'm not like this. So I'm like,
yeah. When I first met you, and have seen you, I was always quite surprised, because you've traveled a lot, and you actually wrote some of your books in English first, right? Or
no, I write in German.
you write in German, so you wrote Blitzed in German.
That's the only
first.
thing that's good about Germany is the German language.
It's a great language.
It's a very good language.
I like the bread as well, and the beer. I like the bread. I like the beer.
Bread is not so healthy, and beer is poison.
Okay, fair. Well, so just the language for you then.
Just the language.
But do you think so you don't have a big, you live in Berlin, but travel a lot. Has that given you a perspective on what you think Germany can learn from the rest of the world?
Well, Germany could learn a huge amount, whenever you spend some time, let's say in Thailand or in Vietnam, and you see how happy and friendly people are, and then you come back, it's like a complete culture shock. Why am I living with these people? I do it right now because my children are going to school here, and I'm not in the position to take them out of school and school them somewhere else right now. So I'm kind of tied to Germany, but certainly unless I become chancellor, which I think also is good, that the future German chancellor kind of doubts his or her way. Maybe it's not a good idea,
Sure.
It's much better than like a politician who's like only has this, Merz only has this, like, I mean, he was in the economy working for BlackRock before making money and destroying the planet.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a human being, so it's a highly questionable, unlike him, he's a robot. It's a highly questionable thing to do, to go into politics. But I also feel it's like people deserve to live better, and so someone has to do it also, But I'm not sure if I should really sacrifice my life. Maybe I should just move to Vietnam, which is a socialist country. Without praising it too much, because I haven't really examined.
Yeah, sure. I think it's kind of socialist
there
on paper a little bit, right? Like Belarus is still or something.
Maybe,
but
yeah.
Of course,
I just like good weather and nice nature and friendly people and good food. That's what I like.
Yeah, then Germany's maybe not the right place.
Maybe
for you,
not.
Right?
Yeah, and I like to write books.
Yeah.
So,
what's your process for writing books? I'm thinking of writing a book myself. I should do it, but I'm kind of addicted to news, and I love.
That's very bad.
Yeah,
news are very bad.
Sure, I don't like it, but I feel like there's a lot of stuff to cover because
journalism.
You
do journalism. That's very bad. Yeah. Journalism is horrible.
Right. I hope so that it can be done well, though, right? Like
it could. Of course, it can be done well, but it's just not good for you. It's not a healthy profession.
No, I don't. I agree with you there, actually.
But. Well, so you have to completely change your life. It's the life of the artist, which is you have to put your life on the line for creating art. It's just a mental decision. But maybe you don't have the talent, then it would be the wrong decision.
Sure, I'm not expecting to write a book that's translated into 29 languages or whatever. But
well, you could also write something that's not even published and still could be a good work of art, But I kind of knew it from the start. I just got a message today I was an exchange student in the US when I was 17, and my best friend from Australia, Steve Wynn, he sent me a message on a messaging platform today, saying that I always told him that I would be a famous author. So I kind of had that, like, you have to be obsessive about it, really. Yeah.
Sure.
To do it. Even if no one reads it, you still have to keep going. Like, I had a period of 13 years where no book was published, and that was not a reason for me to give up. It was just a bit sad, but
sure.
I would continue to write.
Was that in your early career?
Well, my early career started off quite well with my first novel was published when I was 25. And I had 3 novels published at the age of 32. I think that's pretty good.
Yeah,
but then between 32 and 45, I had nothing published. I just took drugs and researched, basically, without knowing that I would research Nazis and drugs.
Yeah.
I just took drugs, which is something that can happen to you in Berlin.
Definitely, it can, I think.
It's a problem. But for me, it was good.
And you could live off your book sales and stuff like that, or...
It was cheap in Berlin to live.
True. Of course, back then. I'm thinking of today's Berlin.
Today it would be difficult.
Yeah, especially while trying to be a creative person. which takes a lot of time and it's hard to rush.
Yeah, I think it's quite unfortunate how the urban space worldwide, especially in the West, has degenerated, has become so expensive. That's what the new mayor of New York actually ran on, to make the city affordable again.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's quite a valuable campaign, because it does enable people to create. And the Western society was always had the edge over the totalitarian systems, because we had, we had the artists, we could create. And now we can't create anymore because it's too expensive to live. So it's all going down. That's why the West is going down. We're not creating culture anymore. So we have nothing to show. We're just being overrun now by other systems.
That's really interesting. It actually brings me to your more recent book, Tripped, which was kind of about the CIA. It was about how Nazis and the drug policies led to the post-war period and had an impact in America. But what I'm interested in, have you heard this idea that the CIA actually funded artists, particularly contemporary art, Jackson Pollock style stuff? I mean, it's well documented that the CIA actually brought jazz musicians on tour because it did show this Western dynamism, right? And actually, during the Cold War, there was this competition between socialist realism, which was very dominant and very good, in my opinion, form of art, with a very clear political message. How involved has the CIA been in culture and drug development?
Well, the CIA is a very colorful animal, I would say. I just criticized them in Tripped for instrumentalizing LSD for mind control experiments and not really helping to develop LSD as a mental health medicine. That's what I focus on. So I have not really concerned myself with. But for example, John Lennon, he said we have to thank the CIA because they gave us LSD, because the CIA also gave LSD to artists. Also, Ken Kesey received LSD from the CIA together with $75 for taking part in this experiment. And while he took his first trip, he saw his novel One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Excellent novel.
Yeah. So the CIA did a lot of bad, I guess, in the 50s and up until now. But maybe it also did some good by giving Jackson Pollock some money. But it's always questionable, if the artist receives money from an evil organization like the CIA.
But what do you think? So, what is your book Tripped about, more widely?
It's mostly about the question that my father asked me: why is LSD not a legal medicine if it's so good against Alzheimer's? Because I found an early study done by an American startup that it helps in microdoses, regenerates the very same receptors that Alzheimer's degenerates. And that was important in my family because my mother suffers from Alzheimer's. So my father, being a former judge and vice president of a state court in Germany, not a drug man, but a man of the law, asked me, so what if I read here but LSD is illegal? Now you say I should give LSD to, your mom, my wife. What's going on here? Something's off. So then I research and I find that I find out in the archives, especially of Novartis, who bought the company of Sandoz in the 90s, Sandoz being the company that developed LSD in the 40s. I found there that there was a close connection between the CEO of Sandoz in the 40s and the leading Nazi biochemist Richard Kuhn, who was searching for a truth drug for the Nazis. So when he heard about LSD, and Sandoz didn't really know what is LSD, he funneled it to the concentration camp of Dachau, where the SS did mind control experiments. Like before the CIA did mind control experiments, the SS did it. And then when the SS lost and the camp was liberated by the American military, these reports landed in the hands of first the US military and then at CIA headquarters. And then CIA kind of developed their own mind control program that was based on the Nazis' mind control program. So LSD became this, became a pharmacological weapon, which never really worked. So you can't really give someone LSD and then extract all the secrets from that person. That was the wet dream of the intelligence officer. It never worked, but it did work. Well, it did prevent LSD from becoming, a big legal bestseller, which is what Sandoz was intending in the first place when they had discovered it. But the CIA made it impossible for Sandoz to bring it out because they influenced the FDA in not allowing LSD to come onto the market. This is kind of the story in a nutshell that I come back to my father, and then he realized that LSD is not illegal because it's dangerous, but that it's actually quite good for the brain. And then he decides, together with my mother, to give her microdoses of LSD, and she really benefits from it and has cognitive improvements whenever she uses LSD. That's why the book in the beginning was called LSD for Mom.
Yeah, LSD for Mama, right? Yeah.
LSD for Mama in German, yeah. Only later it became Tripped. But it's the same book, yeah.
I think that's very interesting. Actually, before I was into, let's say, politics, I actually did an internship at the Beckley Foundation, which is funding a lot of the research into psychedelics. But for me, that was a long time ago. I don't really touch the topic anymore for various reasons. But I'm just interested in the historical side of it, I guess, because we've always wanted a truth serum, right? This is what they were dreaming of, and it goes back in through mythology. This idea that drugs can enhance and you can abuse them. And what have you learned in this world? I think since Rogan, before then, you've been very into the kind of psychedelic world community.
I'm not so much in the community, even though now I have been invited by conferences to speak, also psychedelic conferences. And I think it is actually interesting that there's so many scientists involved in this topic. I think it's quite good because we still don't know very much about the human brain, and the psychedelics can stimulate the brain and can lead to thought forms which otherwise are not thought of. So I basically think psychedelics are very good. I think we should all use them.
Interesting.
Yeah, of course.
What about Pervitin? Should we use Pervitin as well?
Pervitin is not a psychedelic.
No, I know.
It's an addictive stimulant that we should not use.
Interesting.
Yeah. But even when I will be German Chancellor, I will legalize all drugs, because the problem really is governments controlling what we can and what we cannot use. This is a form of population control that is completely outdated and should be abolished. So even methamphetamine should be legal. And it is actually. There's like Adderall and Ritalin. These are amphetamines. These are legal amphetamines.
Sure.
That you can get.
I've been prescribed it in the past.
Yeah. So all drugs should be legal, especially psychedelics. Everyone should use psychedelics. No one should use amphetamines, I think. But if someone really decides to use them, there should be like guidelines and regulations, and at least a clean product that the person can be using, maybe through the prescription of his physician, of his personal physician, and not go to the black market, which would obviously also create a completely different world economy, because a lot of developing countries which are producing drugs are under the influence of the war on drugs, and have crime, drug cartels ruling them instead of their governments, because these drugs are still they're very valuable, and they're being traded, and so it's just a matter of it's a decision whether they are traded legally or illegally. I think legally is a much better choice. So that would be also obviously on my agenda 2033. No, this book Tripped, I think if you're curious about psychedelics, that's a good kind of starting point to understand.
Have you read Chasing the Screen?
I think I read it. I read a lot of drug books, but I can't remember right now.
Johann Hari. It was very good. It was about the prohibition.
I have it at home. Yeah. No, they're good. They're good anti-drug war books out there.
And you think that's one of the key issues that's going to make you German Chancellor, or it's a bigger?
It's just an aspect. I mean, it just makes sense to legalize, especially psychedelics now, and possibly even the fascistoid, we say in German. I don't know what the English word for that is.
Fascistoid? I know,
The
fascioid, I
The
think.
fascioid U.S. administration might be legalizing psychedelics, so that maybe the United States under Trump will be the first. Will become a psychedelic United States, which psychedelic states of America, which of course would be a step in the right direction. But I mean, eventually all these psychedelics will be legalized because they're the only medicines that work against depression, dementia, and other quite severe trauma diseases, quite severe diseases that many people are suffering from.
And I wonder, right, because psychedelics, since I was interested in them, it's kind of gone from a bit of a left-wing thing to being much more acceptable among, non-left-wing people, non-hippie alternative people. It's almost used by Silicon Valley now, right, as part of this self-optimization. I think Joe Rogan, which you've been on, has been one of the people responsible for the normalization, right? And do you think that's always good, or do you think there can be a downside if we're getting, people who are just very competitive and acquisitive at being better at that?
Well, I think also psychedelics have side effects, and this side effect could be that you really are even more sure of your worldview when you're on psychedelics. I mean, they're supposed to make you question your worldview, but they can also enhance it.
Through the ego, right? Some people who take it get a really big ego, I've noticed.
It's possible. It's possible. You can manipulate people through psychedelics. So psychedelics don't turn you into a better person. I would say that they turn you into a healthier person. At least that's when you look at the brain. When you look at the science, what happens in the brain, it is healthy for the human body, for the brain. But they don't automatically. That's just what Leary thought. We just all take LSD. We're all going to be good people. That's not going to happen. But I still think it's a good approach to get rid of that idea that the government can tell you what you put into your system or what you cannot. I think that's not very good. That's actually why the right wing is also pro legalizing drugs. The libertarian movement does not like to accept that the government is telling you that you have we're putting up a wall in your brain, basically a biochemical wall. You can only go so far, but like stimulating your peripheral brain areas is illegal. It's totally absurd. So also right-wing people find this absurd, and I think it's good that most people by now find this absurd. But there's still like a society. Legalizing psychedelics is a society that needs to change. It's a society that needs to lead a discourse. What does it mean? It's basically a therapy. It's just therapeutic substances. So society will change. And there need to be places where you can do it, and there need to be therapists, and there need to be regulations still. Even if it's legal. So it's a big transformational process that society will go through once it legalizes psychedelics. But I think in general, it will be a progressive transformation. I'm a little bit more optimistic than Huxley in like Brave New World, where there's like this drug soma that kind of puts everyone like in a coma,
people, right?
kind of.
Yeah.
But maybe that was also not a psychedelic. Maybe that's more like an opioid.
Yeah, and I mean, what does alcohol do for society?
Right. I could say alcohol is Huxley's soma in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, it was clearly based on something. Well, Norman Ohler, what an interesting conversation. Looking forward to you as Bundeschancellor, as well as your next book, Stone Sapiens. Huge fan of Blitzed, and your other books as well. We didn't have time to talk about the Thomas Mann book that you wrote, but I'm looking forward to reading that on my holiday soon. So thank you very much.
Sure. And you can always go on the Substack if you want to learn more about the books and the writing. Also, all the books are presented there. It was a great pleasure talking to you. And maybe you will be working with me together in the German government, because I also think non-German nationals should be involved.
That's an interesting idea. I agree with that, because I talk so much about German politics and I can't even vote here, and I'm not planning on.
I will change that.
Good. Thank you. Well, I'll be able to vote for you for your second term in that case. Right. But I won't be in government. I will be holding you to account as a journalist.
That's fine. That's cool.
Great.
Thank you.